As we've just discussed, Escobar's involvement in the drug trade had a tragic impact on many aspects of life in Colombia. Perhaps one of the less expected ripple effects though was his indirect impact on the native biota, due to some animal species he introduced that later escaped captivity. Now before going on, I do want to shout out a fellow foreigner I met in Colombia a little while ago for bringing this tidbit to my attention. I believe her name was Maggie. If you're watching, hi. But yeah, basically what happened was that during the late 70s and early 80s, Escobar imported a number of exotic animals from Africa and the US for a private zoo on his Hacienda Napoles estate. Among these animals were a few hippos, which some websites claim were chosen to help hide cocaine supplies from authorities. According to certain sources, their droppings would actually fool sniffer dogs searching for drug shipments. Whatever the case, their ecological impact would prove to be highly disruptive. While many of the other animals would eventually be sold and relocated after Escobar's death, the hippos were not easily movable and therefore remained at the hacienda. With the estate largely abandoned, however, its enclosures would soon deteriorate, allowing the hippos to roam freely. By the mid-2000s, the hippos would even manage to escape the site altogether before moving into rivers and lakes across the region. With a lack of natural predators to contend with, the hippos were also able to reproduce rapidly. The initial 4 or so hippos would quadruple to around 16 during this period. Over the last couple of decades or so, this rapid reproduction has only continued, with recent estimates claiming between 181 to 215 hippos in the Colombian wild as of 2023. At such numbers, these hippos have become an invasive species in Colombia, threatening native ecosystems and local fauna. Due to their large biomass and substantial food intake, for instance, a single hippo can produce around 6 kilograms of waste per day, which significantly alters the water chemistry of the lakes and rivers they inhabit. This is further exacerbated by their tendency to graze on land before entering the water, thereby introducing organic terrestrial content into aquatic systems that are not evolved to handle such a matter. Under such conditions, the livelihoods of local fish and other aquatic inhabitants have been severely disrupted. Many of these species have seen a sharp population decline, thereby damaging ecosystems that depend on their ecological function. Outside of the water, the hippos also commonly cause riverbank erosion. When entering and leaving the water, they'll often trample vegetation with root systems vital to soil stabilization. Once again, this affects many animals reliant on the stability of these banks and their vegetation, including turtles, manatees, otters, and capybaras. In response to this predicament, the Colombian government has announced several preventative strategies aimed to curb further growth of the hippo population. These strategies include surgical sterilization, relocation, and as a last resort measure, euthanasia. The Ministry of Environment even issued a regulation for controlled hunting, though this is yet to occur. Unfortunately, counter-efforts have generally proven logistically complex and oftentimes costly. Relocation attempts have faced many legal hurdles and coordination issues, while euthanasia and hunting of course remain somewhat of a politically sensitive strategy. Still, without intervention, hippo population numbers are projected to reach the thousands within a decade. The actions the government chooses to take now, therefore, will play a vital role in determining the future of many Colombian ecosystems. Whilst Escobar's indirect environmental footprint was a bizarre side effect of his aftermath that few imagined, the real elephant in the room following his death was, of course, the question of the Colombian drug trade and its future. So what exactly happened in the wake of such a kingpin being wiped from the board? Well, with Escobar gone, the Medellin cartel would almost immediately collapse, allowing the government to seize control of their many smuggling routes. It was under this sudden power vacuum, however, that the rival Cali cartel would soon step up to become the nation's new dominant force in drug smuggling. Often seen as the more corporate cartel, the Cali cartel's operations tended to fly further under the radar compared to the explosive publicity their Medellin counterpart was infamous for. Namely, the Cali cartel was more heavily reliant on front companies in order to launder money and hide their illicit business. When it came to smuggling, they'd even sneak cocaine into legal shipping containers so as to avoid suspicion. Despite their comparatively more discreet operation, however, they would be dismantled by the government only a few years later. More on that in a bit. Beyond the Cali cartel, many leftist guerrilla groups, already involved in drug trafficking since the 80s, would also take advantage of the trade's decentralization to assert far greater control of the business for themselves, in turn helping to fund their operations. This included the earlier mentioned FARC insurgency, who, through drug trafficking and extorting landowners, had grown much wealthier and more affluent since their inception in the 60s. As a direct reaction to this rising power, however, paramilitaries also saw explosive growth throughout this period. These paramilitaries were often comprised of, or represented, wealthy landowners, business elites, and drug traffickers who the FARC had negatively impacted. Importantly, these paramilitaries were obviously private and operated outside of government jurisdiction. The government, however, would have a hand in legally sanctioning the formation of other civilian groups around this time. Sadly, whilst initially legal, these groups, known as Convivires, would often go on to become fronts for paramilitary death squads by the late 90s due to weak government regulation. Their crimes, however, would soon be brought to light by the emergence of a number of reports from human rights organisations who'd link Convivire groups to a number of massacres. Many of these Convivires too would also see themselves joining the drug trade to fund their operations. With both guerrillas and paramilitaries now firmly cemented in this industry, disputes over farming territory would then give cause for a new wave of violence between groups. Drug-related corruption, however, was also to be found in places far higher up the food chain. 1994's Liberal President-elect Ernesto Samper Pizano, for instance, was accused of having connections to the Cali cartel, having allegedly received a $3.75 million donation from them. Before long, this scandal, dubbed Proceso 8000 or Process 8000, would become one of the biggest political controversies in Colombian history, leading to mass resignations and arrests while severely tarnishing the state in the eyes of the Colombian public. The US, meanwhile, would choose to temporarily suspend much of its foreign aid to the country in light of the predicament, and even revoke Pizano's US visa. Amidst this whirlwind, Pizano would attempt to enact damage control by taking a firm stance against the Cali cartel, going as far as to hunt down and arrest its leaders, the Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, the following year in 1995. Despite this achievement, however, Samper Pizano's presidency was left ultimately tarnished and crippled by the ongoing cloud of suspicion caused by the allegations against him. Beyond the Colombian government, meanwhile, drug ties would also soon come to light up further north. Just a few years after the Proceso 8000 scandal in Colombia, a former US Department of Justice Director of International Affairs, Michael Abel, would be charged and indicted for his own ties to the Cali cartel. Two federal prosecutors, Donald Ferguson and Joel Rosenthal, were also indicted under similar charges. This, of course, severely undermined the credibility of the US in their anti-drug initiatives and only further exposed the depth of the cartel's influence. Even before these connections came to surface, however, the 1994 US midterm election would see a growing number of Republicans become increasingly outspoken against the rising chaos of the drug war. Under this sentiment, the government would undertake several new counter-narcotic initiatives. One such effort would involve training Colombia's first ever anti-narcotics battalion in late 1999. On a more controversial note, the US would also financially back Colombia in fumigating many coca and poppy plantations. This practice would involve dropping toxic herbicide from planes over farms in a number of southern departments. Due to the high altitude of the sprays, however, the chemicals would often drift into legal crops in the area, along with livestock, pastures, and water sources. This understandably caused much contention among farmers, many of whom had grown sick from the contamination. With a lack of clean water or viable farmland, displacements would also surge under these fumigations. In response, a number of environmental groups would rise up, demanding for greater oversight along with protection of legal agriculture. In 1996, a protest march of around 150,000 peasant farmers would even take place against the program in the city of Puerto Aziz, revealing the true scale of rural discontentment. Despite the large turnout, however, the government would be slow in enacting reform, leaving many country folk in deeper distrust with the state.